I lived my entire life as a giver. I gave my time, my love, my money, my very self, until one evening when the truth shattered everything I thought I knew. The crystal glasses clinked over the dining table I'd set with china I'd inherited from my mother. Jazz music drifted through the rooms of the house I had purchased with my life savings. In the kitchen, the aroma of rosemary chicken filled the air, a recipe I'd perfected over years of Sunday family dinners. I shouldn't have been there at all. Thomas had forgotten to mention his in-laws were coming for dinner, and the house, my house, needed to look perfect again. I should have known what was coming when Rebecca's mother glanced at me with those half-curious, half-dismissive eyes and asked, "And you are?" Thomas, my son, didn't miss a beat. "Oh," he laughed, as if it were the funniest thing in the world. "That's just Eleanor. She's basically our live-in housekeeper, keeps everything running." Everyone laughed, even Thomas. I stood frozen, clutching an empty wine bottle I'd brought up from the cellar. I smiled politely as the floor seemed to disappear beneath my feet, as my heart crumbled piece by piece. I excused myself, set the bottle on the counter, and walked slowly to my bedroom. They kept laughing behind me. Not one of them, not even my own son, bothered to correct him. Not one said, "That's my mother." That night I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the door I'd painted myself years ago when we first moved in. I remembered signing the mortgage, papers, my name, my credit, my down payment. Thomas had just graduated college. Rebecca wasn't even in the picture yet. They had nothing. I gave them everything, and now I was the housekeeper. The next morning, I made coffee like always. I fed the cat Rebecca pretended to like. When she came downstairs in her yoga outfit, too busy on her phone to say good morning, I stood waiting. She looked up eventually. I handed her a ring of keys. Front door, back door, garage, mailbox. "What's this?" she asked, perfectly shaped eyebrow raised in confusion. "Good luck with the mortgage," I said. I walked past her, down the hall, past the photos I had framed, the furniture I had chosen, the walls I had painted. I didn't take anything except my purse and the coat I'd worn when I brought Thomas home. From the hospital 32 years ago. I didn't say goodbye. I heard Thomas calling my name as I opened the door, but I kept walking. He ran after me, barefoot in the driveway, but I didn't stop. I didn't slam the car door. I closed it gently, because something inside me had snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. Clarity is quiet. It doesn't scream or beg. It just knows. And I knew, for the first time in decades, that I was done. They say you don't realize you were drowning until you finally breathe again. That first night in my Aunt Sarah's old apartment, left to me in her will years ago but never used, I felt the silence settle over everything like dust. The place smelled of time, old floorboards, yellowed wallpaper, a heater that groaned like it had survived the Great Depression. I dropped my bag on the kitchen table and stood there, unsure whether to cry or laugh. I did neither. I just stood, staring at the chipped tiles, remembering the home I had just walked away from. Over the next few days, I moved like a ghost. I slept on the couch because the bed frame in the bedroom was broken. I ate peanut butter, sandwiches, and microwaved soup. I didn't call anyone, not because I had no one, but because no one had called me. Thomas didn't text, didn't email, not a single word. I thought about that dinner, about the way they laughed, about the way he laughed. I had raised that boy alone after his father left when he was 4. I gave up my career, my plans, myself. I cleaned hotel rooms at night and stocked groceries at dawn just to keep a roof over our heads. When my parents died and left me that insurance money, I used it all to buy a house, a home. I never asked for rent, never made him pay a dime, and somehow, in Rebecca's world, I had become the help. I started writing at night in old spiral notebooks, the kind I used to buy for Thomas in middle school. I filled page after page, not for Anyone to read? Just for me. I wrote about how I'd stand in the kitchen and wait for him to say thank you. About how I'd cry in the garage when they'd go out to dinner without inviting me. About how I pretended to be asleep so I wouldn't hear them mocking my taste in television shows in the living room I had paid for. Then one day, while looking for a light bulb in the storage closet, I found an old metal trunk that Sarah used to keep under her sewing machine. Heavy, rusted. I pried it open expecting thread and buttons. Instead, I found envelopes. Dozens of them. And one in particular that changed everything. It was addressed to me in Sarah's familiar handwriting, dated nearly 3 decades ago. If you're reading this, it means you've come back, and I'm sorry you had to. My heart pounded as I unfolded the pages. They were yellowed, fragile. Inside were copies of hospital forms, notes, and a single photograph of a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket, not Thomas. There was a name, David Miller. I read the letter 3 times before it made any sense. Sarah had been a nurse at the hospital where Thomas was born. She'd seen something odd in the nursery that night. A last-minute room switch, confusion with the tags. By the time she raised the issue, it was too late. The babies had already gone. Home. She never told me. Said she was afraid. Said she hoped she was wrong. But then, years later, she found a document buried in her files, a quiet settlement from the hospital to another family. And that's when she knew. Thomas wasn't my son. My hands trembled. I thought I might pass out. I stared at the photo, at the name. David Miller. And then something strange happened. I didn't feel grief. I didn't feel rage. I felt free. Not because I didn't love Thomas, but because suddenly, all those years of pain, of feeling like a stranger in my own life, made sense. Maybe that coldness I always felt from him wasn't imagined. Maybe he always sensed something wasn't quite right. Maybe I wasn't crazy after all. I spent the next few weeks like a detective, following threads from Sarah's documents. The Miller family still lived in town, successful, educated. My real son had been here all along, growing up just a few miles away. I found out David owned a bookstore downtown, Horizon Books, a quaint place with hand-lettered signs in the windows. I'd passed it dozens of times over the years without ever noticing. One Tuesday, I gathered my courage and walked inside. The bell above the door chimed, softly, and there he was. About Thomas's age, clean-cut, with reading glasses perched on his nose. He was helping a young woman find a book of poetry, his voice soft and patient. I stood quietly, heart pounding, watching the son I never knew I had. I didn't approach him. Not that day. I just observed, and then I left. But I came back the next day, and the next. It became a ritual. I'd pretend to browse, buy a book occasionally, watch him interact with customers. He was kind, attentive, nothing like Thomas. Meanwhile, I started looking into Thomas and Rebecca's life more closely. I knew their patterns, their haunts. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Rebecca's lifestyle business, some coaching brand she'd launched, was mostly smoke and mirrors. Rented office, space, paid followers, credit cards maxed out to maintain appearances. And Thomas? He had quit his job 6 months ago. Rebecca called it manifesting a new chapter. I called it delusion. They were building a house of cards, and they had no idea the wind was coming. Back again? David smiled as I reached the counter, with another book. This place grows on you, I replied, returning his smile. We aim to please. He rang up my purchase. You know, you remind me of someone. My heart skipped a beat. Who's that? He tilted his head, considering. Not sure. Just someone familiar. We made small talk about books and local events. I never told him my name. It wasn't time. Meanwhile, the first domino in my old life was about to fall. I called a lawyer, not for revenge, but for justice. I wanted the house sold. I had every legal right to it. I had made the down payment, paid every bill, and never signed it over to Thomas or Rebecca. "We'll file the motion this week," my attorney said after I explained the situation. The day the official notice went out, my phone buzzed with Thomas's name. I didn't answer. Later, an email. "Mom, what are you doing? Please call me. Rebecca is freaking out." Of course she was. The mortgage was due, and now they couldn't refinance because the name on the deed, the person they thought was too weak to matter, was mine. A week later, Rebecca left a voicemail. "Eleanor, we really need to talk. This is all just a misunderstanding. Thomas says you're going through something, and we're here to support you, but you're putting our lives at risk, and that's not fair. Their lives, their risk, never mine." The day after the house was officially listed, Thomas showed up at my apartment. I saw him through the peephole, hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes. I didn't open the door. He stood there for a long time, knocked once, then again, then said, "Mom, please don't do this." I stood on the other side, hand on the knob, but I didn't turn it. I let him sit in the discomfort of being unheard, just as I had for years. The confrontation, when it finally came, was quieter than I expected. Thomas eventually caught me outside my apartment building. "Mom," he said, voice cracking, "can we talk, please?" I led him into my apartment. He looked around, taking in the modest furnishings, the piles of books, the notebooks on the coffee table. "Why are you doing this to us?" he asked. "Us?" I almost laughed. "I'm not doing anything to you, Thomas. I'm doing something for me." "You're selling the house, my house. I grew up there, and You let your wife turn me into your maid," I interrupted, my voice low but steady. "You watched it happen. You laughed. You never even apologized." He didn't deny it, just looked at the floor. "I thought you were just being dramatic," he mumbled. "I didn't know it hurt you like that." "That's the problem, Thomas. You never bothered to know what hurt me. You just assumed I'd always be there, cleaning up after you, paying your bills, nodding along while you let that woman chip away at who I was." He flinched. I reached for the envelope from Sarah and handed it to him. "There's something else you need to know." He read the documents in silence, his face paling. This can't be real." "It is. You weren't born to me, but I raised you as if you were. I gave you every piece of myself, even when you didn't want it." "So who's your real son?" I didn't answer. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered. "Now you know how I felt," I said. "For years." I walked him to the door. He turned, eyes pleading. "Can we fix this?" I met his gaze. "I don't know," I said. "But it's not my job to try anymore." I closed the door gently behind him, not with spite, but with finality. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one holding it open. 3 weeks later, I stood outside Horizon Books, gathering my courage. Today was the day. David was shelving books when I walked in. "Hey there," he said, smiling. "Perfect timing. We just got new poetry in." "Actually," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I came to talk." I told him everything about Sarah's letter, the switched babies, the DNA tests. I showed him the documents. He listened in silence, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to a quiet understanding. "This is a lot," he finally said. "I know. I'm not here to ask for a place in your life," I assured him. "I just thought you deserved to know the truth." "I have parents," he said. "They raised me well." "I know. I would never ask you not to love them." We sat in silence for a while. I don't know what to do with this information, he admitted. Neither do I said. But I don't. Regret finding you? He nodded slowly. Can we take it slow? I don't want to make this something it's not. I wouldn't ask for anything else. He gave me a faint, fragile smile. Want to stay for coffee? By autumn, the house had sold. Thomas and Rebecca moved to a small apartment across town. Her business collapsed when clients discovered her fraudulent practices. Thomas tried to find work, but with no recent experience and poor references, doors remained closed. David and I continued meeting for coffee and book discussions. He never called me Mom, and I never expected him to. We were building something neither of us had anticipated, not a conventional mother-son relationship, but a friendship founded on truth and mutual respect. One cold November day, Thomas texted, "Can we meet? Just once." We sat on a bench in the park near my apartment. He looked thinner, more worn. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. "I just wanted to understand." I handed him Sarah's letter. Again. He held it without opening it. "I did a test of my own," he said. "Same result." I nodded. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "I don't deserve it." "You don't," I agreed. "But that doesn't mean I hate you." "Then what does it mean?" "It means I finally love myself more than I love the idea of you." We sat in silence as the meaning of those words settled between us. "I hope he's good to you," Thomas said eventually. "David? He's kind," I said. "Gentle." Thomas smiled faintly. "I guess some of that came from you then." As I stood to leave, I placed my hand briefly on his shoulder. Not forgiveness, exactly, but acknowledgement. Understanding. And that, I realized, was enough. The following spring, David handed me a key to the bookstore. "What's this?" I asked. "I'm opening a new section in the back," he explained. "A reading room, coffee corner, space for community talks. I want it to feel like more than just a store. I want it to feel like belonging." I turned the key over in my hand. "And you want me to help?" He looked at me seriously. "I want you to run it. Make it yours." Tears filled my eyes. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he said. "But I want to." That evening I sat in my apartment, my real home now, not just a temporary shelter, with my notebook open to the final page. I wrote, "I was a woman who gave until I vanished. Then I became the woman who took it all back. Not with rage, not with fire, but with silence, with truth, and with the kind of strength they never saw coming." The next day, I walked into Horizon Books with my head held high. Above the door to the new reading room hung a small wooden sign. "The next chapter." I slipped the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. And this time, it opened a door that was truly mine.